Hi everyone. So I just want to introduce you to my new device, Nirvana. And Nirvana is here. Let me open it up so you can see it. And it's an audio effect and an instrument. Um, so you can use it. Mainly, it was meant as an instrument, but you can use it as an audio effect, and it's pretty nice to use as both. And I even gave you I even give you different versions for audio effect versus instrument for convenience. But here's the instrument version. So when you open it up, you just click here for settings, and this is the main window. So what is Nirvana? Nirvana is it's okay. So I originally intended to make it as a polyphonic feedback instrument, and it kind of became a lot more than that. And I'll just briefly say, there's different things that can make feedback, but I wanted to make one that's like polyphonic that you can play with your keyboard and can do a lot of things with feedback in it. But you can also use it as a drone and an effect, like I said. And like a polyphonic instrument, it has different source options to make the sound. Nirvana's source options are these three: space, material, and circuit. And each of these modes is meant to get like different type of feedback from it. Space mode to get like a room feedback with a mic and a speaker. Material mode meant to get like kind of a similar thing, but on a material instead of a room. Like down here, you could choose different metals and stuff and get that feedback on a material on the surface using a contact mic and a surface transducer, surface speaker, so to speak. And then the third mode, circuit mode, is meant to get circuit feedbacks like with patching jumper cables, and it's kind of meant to be a breadboard, so you can get kind of circuit bending effects and all kinds of circuit kind of digital feedback, so to speak. Basically, they were meant to do with feedback, but with these modes, you can do so much more than that if you want, because they all use different audio sources and effects and things like that. And each of those modes, you can create different kinds of effects and instruments from feedback or otherwise. All right, so that's kind of the main concept of the device. It's really so much you can do in it, especially in circuit mode. You can literally like create a new synthesis in it, and you can create really insane, complex feedbacks and really degrading, but also really pretty sounds. So much you can do with this device. So I'm gonna describe how everything works now, all the parameters. And just bear with me because it's a really in-depth device. So I'm sorry. I'll try to go as quick as I can, but there's a lot to explain. I'll definitely do some deep dives to focus on certain sections. Anyway, so let's begin in the space mode. And so, like I said, there's three modes that you can choose from. And if you're playing it polyphonic or otherwise, you have two systems here. I'm switching between 1 and 2. And there's a blue is 2 and pink is 1. And so you can also have two different things running at once, and they can cross feedback into each other. So yeah, that's what this at the top left is for. You have these two boxes to turn those systems on and off, and you have this toggle to switch the view between the two systems to edit them. And then below that, this is the cross feedback. So, if I had some feedback going here, well, and then, sorry, I'm going to explain what's going on here a bit first more before getting into cross feedback. So let's talk about the space mode and what's happening here. So maybe you can intuitively tell this is like a 2D space. The cat is the listener in the space. Then you have a microphone and a speaker, which you can do feedback with. And then you have a sound source. So this is a 2D space where you can add objects that can make sound and feedback with, and then you listen to them with this cat listener. You can click these objects and drag them around. You can also rotate them by holding Command or Control and dragging them, and then you can rotate them. You can also rotate them below, but this is a quick way to do it. Yeah, and I'm gonna explain it later, but right now I'm gonna turn on drone mode, and that will allow me to just play the device like a drone, like statically without pressing my keyboard. And I'll explain that again more in a second. So I'm gonna run drone mode, and now if I move, now it's active, and if I move this microphone to the speaker, you can hear it. I can turn it up a bit. Now, the objects that you select, maybe you notice down here in this window, their settings appear. So if I select the speaker, here's the speaker settings, microphone, and so on. And in this mode, we can change, for example, the microphone type we're using. Or we can change it to an old telephone mic. And if we go to the speaker, we can also change the speaker model. Yeah. And you can also change many other things. I'll get into that in a second. So basically, we can create feedback using these different mics and speakers, but we can also add in some other sounds. So right now, here's a sound source object, and this is just putting out an almost undetectable amount of noise right now. And if you'll notice, the gain is at -60. So it's just very quiet noise, and this is to help the feedback happen in the first place. So there's a little sound in the room. Otherwise, no feedback would happen. So we can also change that to an oscillator. Let me turn it up and change the waveform and the tuning. Yeah. You also have other source options to add in the room as well, such as a sample playback, where you can drop a sample and play it back. Let's see if I can drop this kalimba sample. Okay, and I'll turn it up. And you can change the playback range, which will update at the end of this phase. And of course, control the volume, reverse it, change the tuning. And maybe you noticed there's also these X and Y parameters. So if you want to map, say, this and move the sound externally, you can use these boxes. Okay. And then there's an external in option. And this would be if you wanted to use this as an effect, you can use the external in, which you can route down here. So I could choose my voice or this sample track and play the sample back. And let me mute it here. And now we hear it in here. And then there's an option to get the audio from the other system. So if we had a system here, we could get the other audio from it. So let's do that. I'm gonna go to this system, turn it on. Change the sound. Okay, and now I'm gonna turn the volume down. And now we cannot hear the system, but we can route it in here. And now this is outputting the audio from the other system. Instead of doing that, we could also try cross feedbacking. So now I'm coming back to where I left off before. So here's the cross feedback, and if I turn this up, we'll start to get the sounds going into each other from each room. So we just heard when I turned it up, we started to hear the blue System 2 come into System 1. And if I made System 1 feedback, now we can cross them. System 1 is pretty screechy. Let's try a different. Okay, cool. Yeah, so now they're cross-feeding back. And that's how the cross-feedback parameter works. Okay, and let me talk a little bit more about the parameters down here. So we went over the source object parameters. Now I'll go over the microphone. So here's the microphone. Like I said before, you can select the mic model here. You can also rotate it down here and map that. And of course the X and Y. Here's where you say which speaker goes to. Surprise, you can have more than one speaker, which you can add here. So I'll add another. And if I move it to B, nothing's happening because it's only sending to A, but if I send to B instead, yep. Now I'll send back to A. Cool. And I can send to both. B is really quiet and kind of shitty sounding. Anyway, okay. And then on the microphones, you can add an effect. So right now there's none, but you could add a filter. And I could turn the cutoff down, and this will change the feedback tone. So let me turn this down. So I'm lowering the frequency of the low pass filter right now, and so it's lowering the feedback tone. Yeah, so you can do a lot with that. And if you type in 0.05, it will go to this center frequency, 624 hertz. And if you have it like this, you can change some settings up here to apply the MIDI to affect this frequency. I'll explain that a bit in a second. And doing that will allow the feedback tone to follow the keyboard pitch, depending on what filter you have and the distance and all. So it's got also high pass, band pass, peak notch, and resonant band pass filter. Yeah. Okay, so there's also a resonator. And this one you can change the tone, the pitch tuning. At 0 steps, it matches the MIDI keyboard. And you can change the bandwidth. Yeah, right now this will just feedback a lot, but you can use it in different ways to get cool different droning effects with that. And then similarly, you have a string model. Just has a different sound to it with a dampening and a decay, of course. Yeah. Okay, and that's the mic, and then the speaker has basically all the same stuff except it has this input clip mode. So it'll clip the input of the microphones going to it, and you can make that a hard or a soft clip. Okay, so that's, oh, and now the listener. So the listener, you can only have one of it, and you can, it has 2 ears, like left and right, so, you know, it depends where you move it. But you can make it in mono if you want, and then that doesn't matter. You can also, so right now it listens to any of these audio sources if it gets near it, but you can also ignore them. And then we only hear the sound of the source through the reverb and the feedback. So this is really useful. Ignore sources for doing different effects or all sorts of things where you don't want to hear the dry signal, but only through the feedback. And then you have this, let me turn this down now. You have this meow thing that sends a meow into the space, just for fun. And also you can test the sound of the space with it. And then the reverb, so there's inherently some reverb from choosing the space, but you can turn that down. The reverb will still be in the feedback, but you won't hear any additional reverb beyond that. So here's with it, and here's without reverb. So yeah, if you don't want that reverb tail and stuff, you can turn that down. And here's the gain of the listener. All right, and then here to the right, these are the things that you can add to this mode of the systems and change about it. So you can add up to 4 microphones, speakers, and sound sources. So I can add more microphones, change what speaker they go to. You can press this and it'll duplicate whatever object you're selected on. So now I have another speaker that was the same as B. Oh, and for mics and speakers, you can delete them with this little X button in the corner. Yeah, and then, okay, so the area changes the size of the room. So if I made it smaller, they'll all start feeding back and be louder. So you can just change the size of the room with this, and now it's really big, so they got to get closer or be louder to feedback. So let me turn it up. But also the area changes. But also the area changes the amount of the Doppler effect when moving and the delay times and stuff like that. So it'll affect a lot of things. There's also an internal pre-delay. And it gets its pre-delay time based on the area. If you don't want a pre-delay, you just turn it off here. Okay, so here's where you select the type of space you're in. So this is just the same as the convolution reverb IR files. It actually requires you to have them in the installation. So it's all the same reverbs you're familiar with if you use convolution reverb, real places, all this stuff. So yeah, that's nice. And then this feedback bleed. So basically, the mics and speakers, the mics get some amount of the reverb in them that gets involved in the feedback. And this just chooses how much, this just attenuates how much of the volume goes back into the microphone. If this is too high, and depending on the space, it can make it so that there's just one tone no matter where these are. So you don't want it to be too high. Yeah. And then down here, so this is the system settings regardless of the mode you're in. So it's some basic stuff. There's just like an ADSR for the amplitude. There's a simple filter that's off right now, and then panning and then gain. Very simple here. Okay, so let me talk about the other modes a bit. Yeah. And then I'll go into these last 3 little sections. Okay, so the other mode is material mode. Let me delete some of this stuff. So material mode, as I said before, it's very similar to space mode. Look, they're identical. but it's meant to, instead of be in a space, be a material that vibrates from this contact mic and surface transducer. And instead of choosing spaces, you choose like material types, like different metals and things like this. Here's a pole. Now, I recommend, well, you can play around with the sound you want, but I recommend in this mode, turning off the microphone and speaker models, because these IRs I made, and they were made with like contact mics and stuff. So if you turn the mic and speaker model off, it'll kind of sound like the material more. It's pretty piercing. Yeah, and but you can try the different models to see how you like the filtering differences in the feedback. Okay. Otherwise, all these parameters are almost the same. There's a few big differences in this mode. Most of them are underneath the hood. Underneath the hood, the microphone does some advanced IR filtering to change at different corners to make it feel like a material moving through a material more. But another big difference is instead of them rotating, because rotation angles don't matter as much on this material feedback, instead they have this tilting parameter, which simulates kind of tilting the speaker or microphone itself. So let's feed them back and hear it. And I'll tilt it. So it's almost like, it's similar to high passing it, but you get a different effect. And it just kind of simulates the different coupling of the material and speaker surface. The other difference between this mode and that is, of course, the types of materials you can choose from instead of spaces. And otherwise, most of the differences are under the hood. In how it deals with the convolution and stuff. But yeah, you get a different kind of feeling and sound from this mode than space mode. And you can also use it as a material resonator and stuff like that, and even throw it in the other mode with the other system source option, stuff like that. You can do cool things like that. Yeah, otherwise I don't have to explain more. You already know the parameters. Oh, a big thing I didn't explain is this toggle here in both space and material mode. And so when this is on, when you play a new note, it clears all the convolution and delay lines and stuff like that, so that it clears the feedback, so you have a clean new voice and it doesn't carry the tone from the previous voice. However, you can turn that off if you want. The envelope will be different at the beginning, because when this is on, it takes like, I don't know, a few milliseconds for it to clear all that. So this mode will give you a sharper attack, and also with it off. But with it off, it'll give you a sharper attack, but it'll also it'll bring in some of the feedback, at least for an instant when you start a new voice. So that might not be desirable, so I keep it on by default, but maybe it sounds cool to you, so you can keep it off if you want. Just try it out. And it's more CPU friendly to have it off, because it takes some CPU to clear the voices. Okay, so now I'll go into the final exciting mode, which is this circuit mode. So this one's may or may not be complicated for you. So just bear with it, especially if you don't know things about modular synth or circuit. So basically, this mode is kind of like a modular synth mode, but I have some almost limitations that make it different than a modular synth, because I didn't want to make another modular synth system. And this system is kind of geared to making feedback and weird stuff happen. So basically, this kind of tries to mimic a breadboard. You may or may not be able to see it in this video, but there's like a line going through each of these columns in this grid, and that's supposed to like connect a column together. So let me step back actually. So this is supposed to represent like a grid, like a breadboard, or like a prototyping kind of circuit board where each of these dots is like a metal lead, or, you know, a point of contact for an audio signal to happen. You can also think of it like kind of as a grid of audio signals. It might be helped to see it more intuitively when I just start showing you. And basically, these boxes on it are different modules. So this one's like a sine tone right now. This is a delay, and this is an addition. So let me show you what I mean a bit. So these things at the bottom, this cat, they listen to different columns of this circuit board. So if I play a note, maybe you can see this sine wave is lighting up. I'm just pressing a note on and off on my keyboard. And when it lights up, the whole column lights up, and that's because, like I said, these columns are connected. So if I move this, now this column's lit up. And now I'm going to move this left ear to hear the lit up column. And I'll move the right one to it now. And I'll move both of them to it. So maybe you can intuitively see that this cat is the left and right speaker output, and whatever column it's under, it listens to it or sends it to that speaker. Now, here's something, the addition that just adds it. Add things together. So right now it's not doing anything, but adding here to by nothing and outputting it to here. So we can get a stereo signal with this. You know, or we can put them together. Okay, so let me explain the objects more in depth. So by design, the right side, so you see this one takes 3 columns, this one takes 3 columns, this one takes 2. By design, the right column is always the output. So if you see output it here, it's on the right one. And if I connect that to the delay, it outputs on the right one as well. And then that makes the left one the input. So this oscillator takes an input on the left and outputs its signal on the right. This delay takes an input on the left and outputs the delayed signal on the right. This operator, math operator, takes input on the left and outputs the sum on the right. Okay, then some of these have middle ones. So when it comes to the math, the middle one is the right-hand operand, which means left plus right equals output. So if I had this sine wave sound, and I add another sine wave, no, let me add a square wave. That's an octave lower. Okay, now if I want to add them together, I can get this sine wave is here, and then I could connect a wire like this. And now this signal is going to the middle one. And now I can hear the result of this plus this here in the right out one. So yes, left, which is the sine wave, is being plussed in the middle by this square wave. And then the rightmost output is the sum of that addition. Now, when it comes to the delay line, the middle one is the CV. So right now, I'm going to turn up the delay time, and we hear a delayed signal. I'll make the left speaker the normal, and the right speaker, the delayed signal. And I'll change this to a square wave. I'll make the delay time 1 second. So there's a 1 second delay between the left and right speaker. But if I want, the middle one, I can modulate the delay time with a CV signal. And that's what the middle middle column does for the delay and other effects. So let me modulate it with this low frequency sine wave. Now I'll modulate it. It was probably stuck in a long delay time from the modulation. So the delay, let me turn it up. Yeah, so it's just kind of crazy because we're getting a whole signal rate modulation of this, but there's a lot of different ways to do that and with math operators to make it less intense. But the point I'm trying to get across is that the middle inlet of these effects is a CV for whatever the effect is. And the math one is the addition, is the one it adds by. So let's hear another example. I'm back to where we were before with this one plus this one is that. But let's change it instead of plus to minus. Okay, it kind of sounds similar. Let's do multiply. Let's do divide. Let's do, this one is the power to the power of this one. So there's different things, math operators you can do, and they all change the signal. The left input for the oscillators is an FM for them. So here it is normally. And if I move this sine wave to the input of the square wave, we can hear it's now FMing it. So left input for the oscillator is FM. Or for the source in general, whether it's a sampler or otherwise, it will FM that playback. So that's what all the inlets do for all these. Now for the delay effects one, you have other options too. So it's a delay now, but we could change it to a filter instead. And then we could CV that filter with, I don't know, the signal. It'll be crazy. Yeah, it's just going to be a crazy signal. But you could CV it. And then it can also be a resonator. Or a string resonator. Yeah. And yeah, that's all the options. But and then it just gets crazy, you know. So like the other thing you can do, like I showed you briefly, is make these wires. So you click a dot when it highlights pink, if you're in this mode, and then you drag it to another pink point and it will make a connection. And these are like jumper cables. So this will just, remember, this whole column is one signal. So it basically joins these two columns together to be the same signal. So I could just simply get this sine wave and drag it across to here. And it's just like making a connection between this sound and that. And then you could use this to do crazy feedback. I mean, it's hard to say what will sound good off the bat, because this will probably just explode. So doing this, you can create a lot of explosions and a lot of circuits that don't work. So just move it around if it doesn't work and re-trigger the voice or something. Let's add in a delay line. Okay, it exploded. Let me make sure the volume's down. Yeah, so just a lot of exploding happening. And let me clip this. And we can listen to other columns. The other thing we can do, moving here, so let me explain this box a little. It's similar to the last modes where you add and duplicate objects here for the source, for the FX, and for the math operator. Down here, you can set the left speaker. There's no listener thing here, so instead you just set the left and right speaker listener here, unless you want to just drag it. You can do, there's a clipping mode on the whole device, which I'll explain in a second, but you can also clip here. I rarely find that I use this mode, but you can to get different sounds, clip it at this gain stage. So a big thing you can change here is instead of listening in left and right, you can toggle this to listen in mid and side. And now this is the mid and this is the side. So if you're on the same signal, it's just going to cut out a lot of the right speaker's volume, because that's what happens if you do the same signal for mid and side. But just find where they're different, you'll get cool stereo sounds. Yeah, it's just a different way to get a stereo image. And in both of these, you can change the width of them to mono at 0%. Okay, basically explains all this. Okay, now I'll go to this section a bit more. Should be quick. So here in this, so we talked about this very top one. Here in the middle is a whole section of where MIDI is sent to. So when you play MIDI, it's like, what will it do? Let me move some of this stuff so it's not so crazy. Okay, so right now here's just a sine tone. And we can, and that's because MIDI is going to control the pitch of all, and that's what this says. When this is on, the MIDI will control the pitch of all oscillators and resonator tunings and sampler. But if I turn this off, no matter what I play, it's just one note. Below that, it changes between space and material and circuit mode. In circuit mode, this one corresponds to changing the delay times based on the MIDI note. So now, depending on which note I play, it will change the delay time. Probably won't be very perceptible with a sine tone. But that's what, if this is on, then it will kind of change the delay time based on the MIDI note for all delay objects. In space and material mode, instead, that toggle affects, it changes the area side and thus the internal delay times based on the MIDI note you play. So if you play a lower MIDI note, in this case, the area would be higher, so it's a longer delay time. And if you play a higher MIDI note, the area gets shorter. And in circuit, it might be the opposite. I can't remember. The filter toggle is the same in both. So if you have this on, it's like I mentioned way earlier that if you have any filter, like here's a filter cut off, or if this microphone had a filter effect, if this filters toggle is on, then the MIDI will change the filter cutoff. And like I said, if you set the cutoff to 0.5, which will be 624 hertz, this is the halfway point, and that means that that frequency will match the MIDI frequency, so you can actually play it like a keyboard and get maybe you can kind of hear, it's kind of a shitty pairing right now, but maybe you can hear when I'm playing the MIDI keyboard, this resonant filter is changing to match the MIDI notes on my keyboard. so you can actually play it, although this particular setup isn't great. And you have to change the distance to kind of fine tune it. Okay, and then the lower one below filters differs in these modes. In space and material mode, you can toggle the mic X or Y, which will offset the mic X and Y position based on the MIDI note you play. So I'm playing different notes and it's moving it higher or lower. In circuit mode, this is instead the ear. So you can offset these listener positions with MIDI notes instead. You can see these yellow ones are where it actually is. Yeah, and then at the very bottom is a few other options. Drone mode. So right now, when I play MIDI notes, it'll create voices. But if I turn drone mode on, instead, MIDI notes won't do anything, and it will just create one voice that drones whenever you run Ableton's transport. So I'll run the transport now and turn it off. Yeah, so that's what drone mode does. It's good for if you're going to use this as an effect. But like I said, there's dedicated effect versions of the device, so you don't have to do that. But drone mode is good for that too, but also just for droning or using it without playing the keyboard and just like, say, moving mic and speakers around. Below that is a additional clipping option. So just be aware of all the different gain staging in this device, especially because it deals with feedback, where you want it to be clipping, where you don't. Especially if you don't want it to feedback and you just want to do a polysynth, you might not want any clipping on, and make sure it's not too loud. Because you might not want it to clip or distort. But yeah. And then here's the main panning and volume. So it's pretty loud right now. Okay. Then two more sections to go. Should be hopefully not too long. So you might have noticed everywhere there's these little circular circles with a sine wave in them. They're next to many parameters. And so any parameter that has that next to it is able to be modulated by the internal modulators. So up here, there's two LFOs and an envelope that you can modulate things with. Anything with this circle you can modulate. So for example, God, this sounds bad. If I went down here and turned on the low pass filter, it has a circle next to it, so I can modulate that. And when I press it, it opens up the modulator attenuators. So now I can map an LFO to it, turn up the frequency. And if I click another one, it opens that one's attenuators. So I could do the panning with the other LFO. Change it to a saw. I don't know. Yeah. And then it's not a very good pairing, but whatever. So yeah, there's many things you can do with that. And one really cool thing I'll point out is that in the circuit mode, you can modulate where the circuit column is. So you can actually, I mean, this is a really bad example, but you can actually change the circuit you're doing on the voice with an envelope or LFOs. There's no sound now. Let's see if we can get something going. Let's see. Okay. Well, let me add some wires too, I guess. And crazy. Yeah, anyway, really bad example, but now I'm holding down a voice, and you can see this box here shows where this object really is. as it moves left to right with this modulator. So in this device, you can actually modulate the circuits that you have, which I think is something pretty unique. And you could do like random modulation, for example. Again, not a very pretty sounding circuit. But this adds so much complexity when you can modulate how the circuit is even connected. Okay, so that's the modulators. And then the final thing to explain is this thing at the bottom, the object position automation looper. So yeah, you can modulate a lot of things with these modulators. This looper allows you to specifically do like automation only for the objects in these 2D spaces. So if I say wanted to move this around, I gotta remove this modulation. Okay, if I wanted to move this mic around, and not just do like an LFO of it, which you can do, of course. Here I could modulate the X position with the random LFO. But if I wanted to get this more organic movement, I can use this looper at the bottom, and that will, if you record it, record any movements that you do. So how it works is, if you record it, it'll start recording and looping at the length that you set here. Right now it's at 2 bars. Whenever you trigger a new MIDI note, whether it's starting the transport in drone mode, or if you're not in drone mode, if you press a MIDI note, it will reset the looper phase to the beginning. So I'll start playing it back, and then okay. And now it will repeat my movement at a 2-bar loop. If I wasn't in drone mode, it actually has an individual looper per voice. So if I do multiple voices, it's actually doing one for each of them. So it's like a complex envelope almost. Can change the loop length here. If you turn on this clear value toggle, anything that you move or change in value will erase its recording if one exists. So if I also recorded the listener, oops, I'm not doing a voice. Okay, let me do it in drone mode. Okay, so I recorded the listener, and that one moves, and so does the mic. But let's say I wanted to erase the listener recording, then I would just turn on this clear value toggle. And the easiest way to do it is just to move the listener now. And that changes the X and Y values, so now it erased that recording, and we only have the mic. Or you can erase all of them with this clear all button. And that's how this looper works. And then if you want, you can change the size of the device here with this zoom thing, depending on your display. Okay, I think that's everything. It's probably a really long video, so I'm sorry for that, but it's a really in-depth device. I'll do deep dives on specific utilities for the device. But yeah, I hope, sorry for the long video. Hope you bore with me, and I hope you enjoyed the device a lot. And you can, I rushed through it because there's so much, but there's so much you can do in all these modes. So I'm really interested what people make with this. Circuit bent effects, I'll add, are a really cool thing to do. You can change these sources to external in and just circuit bend your own audio input coming in. It's really fun to do. But there's so much you can do. All right, enjoy. Thanks.